The words hit Captain Ryan like a plasma blast. He froze, his pulse pounding in his ears. The Queen stood before him, tall and radiant, her emerald eyes glowing with something he couldn't quite understand. Joy. Possession. He wasn't sure. But the words she had just spoken shook him to his core. Human, I carry your child. The grand chamber was silent except for the crackling of golden torches along the walls. The Zyrrak nobles, towering warriors adorned in their ceremonial armor, stood motionless. Their expressions were unreadable, but their eyes burned with intensity. A moment passed. Then the air filled with a thunderous cheer. Ryan took a step back. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. This had to be some kind of mistake, some kind of misunderstanding. His time on this alien world had been filled with negotiations, diplomacy, and a delicate game of survival. He had been sent as a representative of Earth, a diplomat tasked with establishing peace between humanity and the Zyrrak Empire. And yet now, somehow, the Queen was claiming something impossible. He swallowed hard. That can't be right. The Queen stepped forward, her long silver cloak flowing behind her. She was regal, powerful, the embodiment of her people's strength. And yet, in that moment, she looked almost soft, almost human. She reached out, her slender fingers grazing his forearm. Her touch was warm. "It is true, Ryan," she said gently. "You have given me the greatest gift, the future of our people." Ryan yanked his arm away, his heart racing. "No, this can't be possible. I never." He shook his head, his thoughts spiraling. "We never." The Queen chuckled, a low, velvety sound. "No, we did not, in the way your kind understands. But you were chosen. When you accepted the drink during the Feast of Unity, you completed the ritual." Ryan's mind flashed back to the grand feast, the ornate goblet placed in his hands, the rich golden liquid he had been urged to drink as a symbol of goodwill. He had hesitated, but refusing would have insulted the Queen and risked everything. He had taken a single sip, one sip, and now his chest tightened. "You're saying that somehow the child grows within me," the Queen confirmed. Her voice was filled with something reverent, something dangerous. "You are part of us now, Ryan. You belong to me." A chill ran down his spine. Around him, the Zyrrak warriors stomped their feet, a deep, rhythmic sound of approval. They were celebrating him. Ryan took another step back, his thoughts scrambling for logic, for reason. "You don't understand. I have a mission. I have a crew waiting for me. I have a home." The Queen's gaze darkened. "Your home is here now." The chamber doors slammed shut, the sound echoing through the grand hall like a final judgment. Ryan turned, panic clawing at his throat. The massive guards stationed by the entrance stood motionless, their golden spears blocking any attempt at escape. Ryan clenched his fists. "This isn't a choice, is it?" The Queen's lips curved into a soft smile. "It is a destiny, Ryan, and destiny does not ask permission." His breath came in short, sharp gasps. His mind screamed at him to fight, to resist. But he wasn't a soldier. He was a diplomat, a man who negotiated peace, not war. And now he was caught in something far greater than himself. The Queen turned to her people, raising her arms. "The child of two worlds will be born. The future of the Zyrrak, the future of us all." The thunderous roar of the crowd shook the chamber, shaking Ryan to his very core. His world had just changed forever. Ryan sat in the dimly lit chamber, his thoughts a tangled mess of disbelief and fear. The heavy stone walls of the Zyrrak palace loomed around him, trapping him like an animal in a cage. Outside, the sounds of celebration echoed through the grand halls. Cheers, chants, the rhythmic stomping of thousands of armored feet. The Zyrrak people were rejoicing for him, rejoicing for the child he never asked for. His hands clenched into fists as he tried to process the madness. The Queen had spoken with such certainty, as if this had been fated from the moment he arrived. But how? How could this be real? He had followed protocol. He had done everything right. He was sent here as an envoy, not as a pawn in some alien prophecy. A deep sigh escaped him as he ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He had to think. He had to find a way out. His crew, his ship, they were waiting for him, if they hadn't already assumed the worst. He pushed himself up from the stone bench, pacing the length of the chamber. His room, if it could even be called that, was luxurious, but in an unfamiliar way. The walls were carved with intricate golden symbols, glowing softly with Zyrrak energy. The bed was massive, made of some kind of woven metallic fabric that shimmered under the torchlight. A small table held exotic fruits and a decanter of the golden drink that had sealed his fate. Ryan stared at the drink. His jaw tightened. The drink during the Feast of Unity. That was the moment everything changed. He cursed under his breath. He had been so focused on the delicate political dance, on proving that humanity wasn't a threat, that he had walked blindly into their trap. A knock at the door made him turn sharply. It wasn't so much a knock as a heavy pounding, deliberate and final. The doors swung open, revealing one of the Queen's personal guards, a towering Zyrrak warrior with sharp, angular features and piercing golden eyes. His name was Korak, one of the highest-ranking fighters in the Empire. Ryan had met him only a few times, and each encounter had been tense. "The Queen summons you," Korak said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Ryan held his ground. "Tell her I'm not in the mood for another celebration." Korak's lips curled in what might have been amusement, or perhaps disdain. "This is not a request. Human." Ryan exhaled sharply. He had no choice. He had to play along. At least for now. The guards escorted him through the palace, past towering archways and opulent halls, where Zyrrak nobles whispered and stared at him as he passed. He could feel their curiosity, their approval. To them, he was an honored guest, the father of their queen's child, a sacred figure. To him, this was a prison. When they reached the grand throne room, the queen sat waiting, draped in ceremonial robes of deep crimson, the Zyrrak royal crest embroidered in shining silver. She watched him with quiet amusement as he was led before her. "You look troubled, Ryan," she said smoothly. He crossed his arms. "Troubled? That's an understatement." The Queen rose gracefully, stepping down from the raised platform. "You are unhappy." Ryan laughed bitterly. "Unhappy? You've taken me hostage and declared that I'm the father of some royal alien hair. Forgive me if I don't seem thrilled." The Queen tilted her head, studying him. "You misunderstand. You are not a prisoner, Ryan. You are an honored part of our future. Your future, not mine," he shot back. "I have a crew, a duty, a life that doesn't include being some royal pet." Her expression darkened slightly, but there was still patience in her voice. "You are more than a guest, Ryan, more than just an outsider." She stepped closer, her emerald eyes locked onto his. "The child inside me is not just mine. It is yours in ways you cannot understand." A chill ran through him. There was something unsettling in the way she said it, something deeper than just tradition or ceremony. He took a step back. "Explain." The Queen exhaled, her gaze momentarily flickering toward the massive stained glass windows that stretched along the far wall, depicting the history of her people. When she looked back at him, there was no arrogance in her voice, only certainty. "The Zyrrak do not reproduce as humans do. Our process is unique. The drink you consumed, the ritual we performed, it was not just symbolic. It was biological. Your presence, your essence, triggered something in me that even our oldest scholars cannot fully explain. The child is not just Zyrrak. It is part of you." Ryan's breath caught. He struggled to wrap his mind around it. "That's impossible." "Is it?" The Queen's expression was unreadable. "Your species prides itself on scientific discovery. Is it truly so hard to believe that there are things beyond your understanding?" Ryan clenched his fists. I don't care what kind of science or magic your people believe in. This isn't my choice, and I sure as hell won't stay here like some relic of your empire. The Queen's gaze sharpened. If you leave, the child may not survive. Silence fell between them. Ryan felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under him. He swallowed, his voice lower now. What do you mean? The bond is not just symbolic, she explained. The child's development is tied to you. If you leave, its genetic structure will collapse. It will not live. Ryan's mind reeled. He had expected manipulation, expected the Queen to try and control him. But this was something worse. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. His thoughts were a mess. If she was telling the truth, then leaving wasn't just about his freedom anymore. It meant choosing between his life and the life of an unborn child. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to think. There had to be another way. There had to be a way out of this. A sudden beeping sound echoed through the hall. Ryan froze. That sound, it was human technology. One of the Queen's advisors stepped forward, holding a sleek black device in his clawed hands. My Queen, he said, bowing slightly. We have intercepted a transmission. The advisor pressed a button. A voice crackled through the device. This is Commander Harris of the UES Pathfinder. We are requesting immediate communication with Captain Ryan. We have received intelligence that he is being held against his will. If our request is ignored, we will be forced to take action. Ryan's heart pounded. His crew, his people, they had come for him. For the first time in days, hope flickered inside him. But when he turned back to the Queen, she was no longer smiling. Her voice was cold, final. They will not take you, she said. You belong to me. Ryan's breath hitched as the words echoed in the throne room. The Queen's voice, once smooth and calculated, now carried an unmistakable edge of finality. You belong to me. The message from the UES Pathfinder still crackled in the air. The voice of Commander Harris demanding his return. His crew was here. His people had come for him. A surge of hope shot through him, but it was quickly drowned by the reality of his situation. The Queen remained still, her emerald eyes locked onto his, unwavering. The flickering golden torches cast dancing shadows over her face, making her expression even harder to read. Around them, the throne room was deathly silent. Zyrrak nobles and warriors watching, waiting. Ryan took a slow step forward, keeping his voice even. My people won't just stand by, Queen. They'll come for me, one way or another. She let out a quiet sigh, as if disappointed, rather than angry. Your people see this as an abduction, but they are wrong. You were chosen. You are here because you are meant to be. Ryan clenched his fists. I chose to be a diplomat. I chose to help build peace between our species. I didn't choose this, to be locked in a palace, to be used for whatever your empire wants from me. The Queen stepped forward, the flowing crimson fabric of her royal robes sweeping over the marble floor. Do you truly believe I see you as a prisoner, Ryan? Yes, he said without hesitation. A flicker of something crossed her expression, regret, amusement. He couldn't tell. I could have taken any human, she said softly. There are thousands in the galaxies, and yet you are the one who was chosen. Ryan exhaled sharply. And why is that? Why me? She lifted her chin slightly, as if considering her answer carefully. Because of what you represent. Not just as a diplomat, but as something more. You are a bridge, a connection, a force that unites, not divides. Ryan frowned. That sounds like poetic nonsense. The Queen actually smiled, but there was sadness in it. You have always believed in diplomacy, in peace. That is why you were sent here in the first place. And that is why my people, why I, chose you. His stomach turned. Your people chose me, or was it you? Her silence was answer enough. Ryan rubbed his temple, his frustration mounting. His crew was right outside this fortress of a palace, ready to fight for his return. But the Queen wasn't acting like an enemy. She wasn't acting like a dictator forcing him into servitude. She believed in whatever this was, and that was dangerous. Ryan's mind raced. He had two choices: fight back and risk war, or find another way out. "Let me speak to my crew," he finally said. "I can convince them not to attack. But only if you let me talk to them myself." The Queen studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Very well. You may speak to them. But understand this, Ryan, if they seek war, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves." She turned toward her advisor, who handed her the sleek human communication device they had intercepted. She pressed a small crystal embedded in the side, and the device glowed to life. A second later, the familiar voice of Commander Harris filled the room. "Ryan, are you there?" Ryan's chest tightened. Hearing Harris's voice, the concern in it almost made him forget the gravity of his situation. He could go home. He could leave all of this behind. But then he thought about what the Queen had said. If he left, the child wouldn't survive. Ryan took the device, inhaled deeply, and responded, "Harris, I'm here." "Thank God. Are you safe? Are they holding you against your will?" Ryan hesitated. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Was he being held against his will? Yes, but also no. The Queen wasn't lying when she said he wasn't a prisoner. He had been given freedom within the palace, treated with respect, given anything he could ask for. And yet, freedom without a choice was no freedom at all. He exhaled sharply. "It's complicated, Harris." There was silence for a moment. Then Harris's voice returned, sharper this time. "Do you want us to get you out? Say the word, and we'll break orbit. We have the firepower to take you back, Ryan." Ryan looked at the Queen. Her face was unreadable now, but he could feel the tension in the room. The Zyrrak warriors gripped their weapons just a little tighter. The atmosphere was on edge. If he said yes, war was coming. If he said no, he might never leave this place again. His heart pounded. "Harris," he said slowly, choosing each word carefully, "I need you to trust me. No sudden moves, no aggression. Just give me time to figure this out." A long pause. Then, "Ryan, are you sure?" Ryan swallowed. "Yes, I'm sure." There was another silence before Harris finally spoke again. "Understood. We'll hold position for now. But if anything changes, you let us know. We're not leaving without you." The device powered down, leaving the room in dead silence. Ryan exhaled, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on him. He had just prevented a war. But in doing so, he had also delayed his own escape. The Queen stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You made the right decision." Ryan turned to her, his eyes hard. "I didn't do it for you. I did it to stop bloodshed." She nodded slightly, accepting his answer. "Regardless, you have bought yourself time. And in time, you will understand the truth of what is happening here." Ryan frowned. "And what truth is that?" She took another step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth, Ryan, is that this child inside me is not just mine, and not just yours. This child is something far greater." A chill ran down his spine. "What are you talking about?" She exhaled softly. "The Zyrrak people have existed for millennia, but we have never been able to produce an heir like this. Our genetic structure was never compatible with outsiders. Until you." Ryan shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. You said this was because of the drink, the ritual." She nodded. "Yes, but that was only the catalyst. Something in you made this possible, Ryan. Something that even my people do not fully understand." His stomach twisted. He wasn't just being used for some political strategy. He wasn't just trapped in some ceremonial nonsense. No, he was something else entirely to them. Something different. The Queen's voice was soft, but deadly serious. "Ryan, This child will change everything. It will be the bridge between our species, or it will be the beginning of something far greater. Ryan staggered back, his mind spinning. He had come here as a diplomat. Now, he was something else entirely. Ryan barely had time to process the Queen's words before the distant echo of alarms filled the Grand Palace. The rhythmic chanting of the Zyrrak warriors turned into urgent shouting. The torches lining the walls flickered violently as a heavy rumbling trembled through the stone floor. Something was happening. The Queen turned sharply, her emerald eyes narrowing as she gestured to her guards. A hulking Zyrrak warrior stepped forward and bowed his head. "My Queen, the human fleet has moved into an aggressive stance. Their warships are charging weapons." Ryan's stomach dropped. The UES Pathfinder and the rest of his fleet were holding position. For now. But they were preparing for the worst. Harris had said they weren't leaving without him. And now, the Zyrrak saw this as a threat. The Queen's expression remained unreadable as she looked toward Ryan. "Your people lack patience." Ryan's heart pounded. This was escalating too fast. He had convinced Harris to hold off an attack, but his crew wouldn't sit idle forever. And the Zyrrak weren't the type to tolerate threats. He took a step forward, hands raised. "Listen, I can talk to them. I just need access to a proper comm system. I can tell them to stand down." The Queen lifted a hand, silencing him. "And why should we? They come with weapons aimed at our sky. They prepare for war." Her voice was calm. But beneath it, there was a sharpness, a warning. Ryan turned to the warrior who had spoken. "Are they firing weapons, or just preparing them?" The guard's golden eyes glowed faintly. "They are waiting. But they are not here for peace." Ryan exhaled sharply. They were trying to intimidate the Zyrrak into surrendering him. Harris had lost patience. "I need to talk to them," Ryan repeated, forcing the urgency into his voice. "If they think I'm in danger, they'll attack. I can stop this before it gets worse." The Queen's gaze bore into his. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she nodded. "Very well. You will speak to them." Ryan barely had time to breathe in relief before she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But make no mistake, Ryan. If your people attempt an attack, we will not hesitate. This world is mine. You are mine. And no fleet in the universe will change that." The words sent a chill down his spine, but he forced himself to stay focused. The Queen led him through the massive corridors, her guards flanking them on either side. The palace hummed with tension. Servants whispered urgently. Warriors gripped their weapons tighter. They were preparing for battle. Ryan hated this. The Zyrrak weren't just some random alien race. They were a militaristic superpower, one of the most formidable in the known galaxy. A war between them and humanity wouldn't be a simple skirmish. It would be a massacre on both sides. And now he was at the center of it. They reached the communication chamber, a circular room lined with golden panels that pulsed with energy. In the center was a floating console, projecting a holographic display of the human fleet above the planet. Ryan's chest tightened at the sight of the UES Pathfinder, its hull gleaming under the light of the twin suns. A Zyrrak technician pressed a sequence of glowing runes on the console, and suddenly, Harris's face appeared on the holographic screen. "Ryan." Harris's eyes widened in shock and relief. "Damn it, we've been trying to reach you. Are you okay? Have they hurt you?" Ryan straightened, feeling the weight of two entire species watching him. "I'm fine, Harris. I told you, this isn't what you think it is. You need to call off the fleet. We can't afford to start a war." Harris's expression hardened. "Ryan, we're looking at a heavily armed battle-ready force. This doesn't look like diplomacy to me. It looks like you're being held hostage." Ryan swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not a hostage. The situation is complicated." Harris's brows furrowed. "Complicated? What the hell does that mean?" Ryan hesitated. He couldn't tell Harris everything. Not now. Not about the child. If the higher-ups back on Earth learned of this, there would be even bigger problems. It means we have a chance to solve this peacefully, Ryan said firmly. But if you escalate things, people are going to die. Harris exhaled sharply. He ran a hand down his face, clearly torn between duty and trust. Damn it, Ryan. We're here to bring you home. Ryan glanced at the Queen, who remained silent but watchful. I know, Ryan said. But listen to me, Harris. I'm asking you to trust me. Just wait. Give me time to work this out. Harris shook his head, clearly frustrated beyond belief. Then another voice crackled through the comms. A new voice. That is unacceptable. Captain Ryan is a representative of the United Earth Federation. We demand his immediate return. Ryan's stomach tightened. That wasn't Harris. That was Admiral Renfield, the commanding officer of the entire fleet. If he was involved now, this was even worse than Ryan thought. Sir, Ryan started, trying to sound as diplomatic as possible. I understand your concerns, but if we rush into this, we'll be making a mistake. We have an opportunity here to avoid war. The Admiral's voice remained cold. War is not our concern. Earth does not negotiate with captors. Ryan felt his blood go cold. That was a threat. The Queen took a step forward now, speaking for the first time. Her voice was calm, but filled with steel. Human Admiral, your weapons will not save you. Your fleet is powerful, but my people have fought wars for centuries. If you bring war to my world, we will burn your ships from the sky. Ryan flinched. This was spiraling. Harris looked tense. Ryan, what the hell is happening? Why do they think they own you? Ryan exhaled, his mind racing for a solution. The Queen wasn't bluffing, and neither was Earth's fleet. One wrong word, one wrong move, and a battle would begin. He looked between Harris and the Queen, knowing that this was the moment that would define everything. He had to buy more time. Listen, Ryan said quickly. No one fires. No one moves. We settle this the right way. Harris looked uncertain. The Admiral, however, was unmoved. We will allow you a window of time, Captain Ryan. But if we do not receive confirmation of your return within the next 24 hours, we will take action. Ryan exhaled. 24 hours. That wasn't much time, but it was all he had. The transmission ended, the screen flickered off, and the room fell into heavy silence. The Queen studied him, her emerald gaze filled with something indecipherable. You have little time left, Ryan. Ryan turned to her, his jaw clenched. Then you'd better start giving me answers. She smiled slightly, as if she had been expecting this. Then it is time you learned the truth. Ryan's heart pounded. Whatever that truth was, he had a feeling it would change everything. Ryan stood in the dimly lit chamber, his mind racing with the weight of the impossible decision ahead. 24 hours. That was all the time he had to prevent a war. He had stopped the first wave of aggression, but now the situation had escalated beyond his control. The Queen had promised him answers, and he needed them now. He turned to face her, his fists clenched. You keep saying this child is different, that it's not just Zyrrak, not just human. Then tell me, what exactly does that mean? The Queen regarded him with an unreadable expression. For the first time, there was something almost hesitant in her demeanor, as if she was considering how much she was willing to reveal. Finally, she exhaled and motioned for him to follow. Come with me. Ryan hesitated, but he had no better option. He walked beside her as she led him through the grand palace, past towering pillars carved with ancient Zyrrak symbols, past warriors who watched him with quiet intensity. The path led them deep beneath the palace, into a vast underground chamber unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were lined with glowing inscriptions, shifting and pulsating as if alive. In the center of the room stood a raised platform, surrounded by an intricate ring of alien technology. Ryan stepped closer, his gaze locking onto the holographic image floating above the platform. It was a projection of a being unlike anything he had ever seen. The figure was humanoid, yet its form flickered, as if it were both solid and ethereal at once. He turned to the queen. "What is this?" She stepped beside him, her voice quiet but firm. "This is the first one." Ryan frowned. "The first one." She nodded. "Long ago, before the Zyrrak Empire, before even the oldest of our records, there existed a being unlike any other, a hybrid of multiple species, a force beyond imagination. It was said to be the first and only true bridge between civilizations, a being that could unify or destroy. It vanished from history, but legends say its bloodline was never truly lost. And now," she turned her gaze to Ryan, "it has returned." A cold chill ran down his spine. "Are you saying this child, our child, is some kind of reincarnation of this first one?" "Not a reincarnation," the queen corrected, "but the first of its kind in thousands of years, something even we do not fully understand." Ryan stared at the flickering projection, his thoughts spiraling. This wasn't just about politics or alliances anymore. This was something far bigger. If what the queen was saying was true, then this child wasn't just a merging of two species, it was something that wasn't supposed to exist. His pulse pounded. If this is true, then what does that mean for the child? For us? The queen hesitated before speaking. "There are those among my people who fear this birth. Some believe it is an omen of strength. Others believe it is a threat to the natural order. If they believe this child is too dangerous, they may act against it." Ryan's jaw tightened. "And by act against it, you mean?" She met his gaze, her expression grim. "There are those who would try to eliminate it before it is even born." His blood ran cold. Now it all made sense. The tension among the Zyrrak elders, the quiet whispers he had heard in the palace halls. This wasn't just about him being a captive. This was about power. There were those who feared what this child represented. And if they saw it as a threat, then they wouldn't just be coming for the queen. They'd be coming for him. Ryan took a deep breath, forcing himself to think. "And what about my people? What happens if Earth finds out about this?" The queen's expression darkened. "They will want the child for themselves." He cursed under his breath. She wasn't wrong. If the United Earth Federation found out about this, they wouldn't see it as a miracle. They'd see it as an opportunity, a way to control something powerful, something they didn't understand. Ryan turned away, running a hand through his hair. "So we're trapped between two threats. Your people want to destroy the child, and mine will want to control it." The queen's voice was quiet. "Yes." Silence hung between them. Then suddenly, the chamber shook. A deep rumbling vibrated through the walls, followed by the distant sound of explosions. Ryan's eyes widened. What the hell was that? A Zyrrak guard rushed into the chamber, his face pale beneath his armor. "My queen, the outer palace has been breached. An attack, an assassin." Ryan felt his stomach drop. The queen's gaze turned ice cold. "Who?" "The elders," the guard said grimly. "They have deemed the child a threat to the Empire." Ryan's chest tightened. He had been right. There were factions within the Zyrrak who wanted to erase this child from existence before it could even be born. The queen turned to him, her voice sharp. "We must go. Now." Ryan didn't hesitate. He followed as the queen strode forward, her guards falling into formation around them. The palace halls were chaos. Warriors clashing with assassins clad in dark armor, the scent of burning metal and smoke filling the air. Ryan ducked as a blast of energy struck the wall beside him, sending debris flying. He turned just in time to see a Zyrrak warrior collapse, a deep wound burning through his chest. "Damn it," Ryan growled, grabbing a fallen weapon. He wasn't a soldier, but he sure as hell wasn't going to stand by and watch this happen. A dark-clad assassin lunged at him, blade flashing in the dim light. Ryan barely dodged, swinging the weapon instinctively. The blast struck the assassin's shoulder, sending him staggering back. Another explosion shook the corridor. Ryan looked up to see a massive breach in the palace wall. Through the opening, He caught a glimpse of the Zyrrak fleet scrambling in the skies, warships preparing for battle. And beyond them, in orbit, he saw the UES Pathfinder still holding position. Harris was still waiting. Ryan gritted his teeth. He was running out of time. The Queen grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "We must reach the royal vault. It is the only place where the child will be safe." Ryan nodded, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about choosing a side. If he stayed with the Queen, he would be forever tied to the Zyrrak, forever tied to this child. If he left with Harris, he could return to Earth, to his life. But at what cost? Explosions thundered around them as the palace burned. And Ryan knew, whatever decision he made next would shape the future of two entire species. The palace burned around them, filling the air with the acrid scent of smoke and scorched metal. The once grand halls of the Zyrrak Empire were now a battlefield, a clash of warriors loyal to the Queen and those who saw her unborn child as an abomination. The echoes of battle rang through the corridors, blades striking, energy blasts detonating against walls, the cries of the wounded fading beneath the chaos. Ryan barely had time to react before another explosion rocked the palace, the force nearly knocking him off his feet. He turned, gripping his stolen energy rifle tighter. His mind was racing, adrenaline flooding his system. He had fought to prevent a war between humanity and the Zyrrak. But now, the war had already begun, within the palace itself. The Queen moved swiftly beside him, her crimson robes torn from the battle. Despite the turmoil, she carried herself with the same regal grace, though Ryan could see the tension in her face. She wasn't just a ruler anymore. She was a mother protecting her child. One of her guards, bloodied and panting, rushed to her side. "My Queen, we cannot hold them for much longer. The elder factions have seized the lower chambers. They are moving toward the vault." Ryan stiffened. The vault, the one place the Queen had deemed safe for the child. The one place they had to reach. The Queen's gaze hardened. "Then we must move now." Ryan clenched his jaw. "How many are we up against?" The guard hesitated before answering. "Too many." Ryan cursed under his breath. He could hear the growing commotion ahead, the telltale hum of plasma blades igniting, the heavy boots of warriors rushing toward their location. They had to make a decision. Ryan turned to the Queen, keeping his voice low but firm. "You said this child is different, that it's something neither of our species fully understands. If that's true, then there's no way they'll stop coming after it." The Queen nodded grimly. "Yes, that is why it must survive." Ryan exhaled sharply. He had spent his entire life negotiating peace between species, but this was different. He wasn't just protecting a political figure. He wasn't just trying to prevent war. He was fighting for a life that hadn't even been born yet. A loud crash sounded behind them. Ryan spun around just as a squad of dark-clad assassins stormed through the wreckage. Their armor was sleeker, their movements faster. These weren't ordinary warriors. These were the elite, the ones sent to eliminate threats before they became a problem. Ryan barely had time to react before the first assassin lunged toward him. He ducked just in time, the plasma blade whistling inches above his head. Without thinking, he slammed the butt of his rifle into the attacker's ribs, sending them staggering backward. He fired twice, the energy blast searing through armor as the assassin collapsed. The Queen's guards clashed with the intruders, the battle turning the hallway into a storm of violence. Ryan caught sight of one assassin breaking through the line, headed straight for the Queen. His instincts took over. He surged forward, grabbing a fallen weapon off the ground. The blade hummed to life in his grip, the energy vibrating beneath his fingers. He wasn't a soldier. He had never been trained for war. But at that moment, he didn't hesitate. The assassin raised their blade, aiming for the Queen's heart. Ryan moved first. With a swift, desperate strike, he drove the blade into the assassin's chest. The force of the impact sent them crashing backward, their weapon clattering to the ground. The Queen turned, meeting Ryan's gaze. For the first time, she looked surprised. Ryan didn't waste time. He grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. "We need to go. Now." The remaining warriors covered their escape as Ryan and the Queen rushed toward the vault. The corridors twisted and turned, leading them deeper beneath the palace. The further they went, the quieter the battle became, the sounds of fighting fading into the distance. Then, finally, they reached the vault. A massive door, covered in ancient inscriptions, stood before them. It was unlike anything Ryan had seen before, the material shifting between metal and something else entirely, something almost alive. The Queen placed her hand against the surface. The inscriptions glowed, reacting to her touch. With a deep mechanical groan, the massive doors began to open. Inside, the vault was pristine, untouched by the chaos above. The walls shimmered with the same pulsating energy as the symbols outside. In the center of the room was a floating containment pod, bathed in soft blue light. Ryan frowned. "What is this?" The Queen stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "It is where the child will remain, until it is safe." Ryan's pulse quickened. "You're putting it in stasis." The Queen nodded. "There is no other way." Ryan clenched his jaw. This was bigger than him, bigger than the war above. If the Queen was right, if this child really was something beyond Zyrrak or human, then it wasn't just in danger now. It would always be in danger. And then he realized something far worse. The elders weren't the only ones who feared the child. If the United Earth Federation found out about this, they would never let it go. They would never stop coming for it. Ryan felt his stomach twist. He had spent so long trying to escape this world, to return to his own people. But now, for the first time, he wasn't sure if he could. The Queen turned to him. "Once the stasis pod is activated, the child will be beyond harm. But you must decide now, Ryan." His throat felt dry. "Decide what?" Her gaze was steady. "Whether you stay." Ryan's breath caught. He had never considered staying. From the moment he had arrived, all he had wanted was to leave, to return to his crew, to return to Earth. But if he left now, the child would grow up without him. He looked at the Queen, looked at the stasis pod, looked at the war raging just outside these walls. His people were still waiting for him. Earth was waiting for him. But if he left, if he let this child be raised alone, surrounded by those who feared it, then would he be any better than the ones trying to destroy it? The Queen was watching him closely. She already knew his answer. Ryan exhaled, his heart pounding. Whatever he decided, there was no turning back. And he only had one more chance to make it right. Ryan had always believed that the hardest choices in life were the ones that defined a person. Now, standing inside the vault, staring at the stasis pod that would protect his unborn child, he realized that belief had never been tested until this moment. Outside, the palace burned. The distant thunder of battle raged through the underground halls, shaking the very foundation of the Zyrrak Empire. Above them, in orbit, the human fleet waited, ready to strike. He had spent his entire career negotiating peace, but now, the time for words was over. Now he had to act. The Queen stood beside him, her emerald eyes watching him carefully. She had never once demanded he stay. She had never once tried to force him to accept his role in all of this. But she had never doubted that, in the end, he would choose to. Ryan clenched his jaw, his heart pounding. What happens if I leave? The Queen turned her gaze toward the stasis pod, the soft blue light reflecting off her skin. The child will be protected, for a time. But there will always be those who seek to control it, others who seek to destroy it. Her expression darkened. And without you, it will never know the truth of who it is. Ryan exhaled, his pulse thundering in his ears. He had spent years serving the United Earth Federation, believing in diplomacy, believing in the power of understanding between species. And yet here he was, caught between two worlds, Two sides that neither trusted nor understood each other. His mind screamed at him to run, to return to his people, to his ship, to the life he had spent years building. But deep in his gut, he knew something far worse. If he left now, he would never be the same again. He looked at the Queen. If I stay, what happens next? She studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she stepped forward, lifting her hand to rest lightly on his arm. Then we raise this child together, she said quietly, as a bridge between our people, as a future beyond war. A sharp explosion shook the vault. Ryan turned just in time to see a breach forming in the stone walls. The assassins had found them. The Queen moved swiftly, stepping between Ryan and the approaching warriors. Her eyes flashed with fire, her presence commanding even in the face of danger. Ryan gritted his teeth and raised his stolen weapon. This was it. This was the moment. He had spent his whole life avoiding war. Now he had no choice but to fight for what mattered. The first assassin lunged forward, plasma blade whistling through the air. Ryan dodged, narrowly avoiding the strike before slamming the butt of his weapon into the attacker's ribs. The assassin staggered, but another rushed forward, this one faster. Ryan barely had time to react before a flash of silver moved past him. The Queen. With a deadly grace, she twisted her blade, cutting through the assassin's armor in one fluid motion. The warrior collapsed, but more were coming. Ryan fired, the energy blast hitting its mark. But there were too many. And then, the worst happened. A new figure stepped through the breach, one of the Zyrrak elders. His dark robes flowed behind him as he raised a hand, fingers glowing with energy. Ryan felt his chest tighten. He didn't need to hear the words to know what the elder was about to do. He was going to destroy the stasis pod. The Queen saw it too. She moved instantly, but it was too late. The energy blast was already forming, aimed directly at the child inside. Ryan didn't think. He acted. With every ounce of strength he had left, he lunged forward, shoving the Queen aside just as the blast was released. The energy struck him instead. Pain exploded through his body, fire racing through his veins. He felt himself collapsing, his vision swimming, his body screaming in agony. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the Queen shouting his name. The vault flickered. The battle raged on. But all Ryan could see was the stasis pod, still intact, still glowing, still protecting his child. A deep breath rattled in his chest. He had done it. He had saved them. The Queen's face appeared above him, her expression shaken for the first time. She pressed a hand to his chest, her voice urgent. "Ryan, stay with me." His vision blurred, but he managed a weak, defiant smile. "I'm still here," he whispered. The battle wasn't over yet. With one final, shuddering breath, Ryan forced himself to stand. He wasn't leaving. This was his home now, and he was going to fight for it.